What's up, gorgeous? I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to another episode of the Fierce Framework, where we talk about becoming fierce through messy action, baby steps, and cultivating our confidence. I'm your host, Mary Beth. I'm a self-diagnosed ADHD entrepreneur with a vision to see more women break out of the mold society tells us we're supposed to fit into and start living lives that we're excited about. My goal is to help other neurospicy entrepreneurs work sustainability and individuality into your business so that your business works for you and supports a life that lights you up. So I hope you find encouragement and inspiration in these episodes. Let's get into it. What's up, gorgeous? I'm so glad you're here. Today, we are kind of continuing on in the romanticize section of the framework. We started last time with talking about just self-acceptance and needs and accepting that you have needs, identifying those needs, and then meeting those needs as best you can. And I want to build on that from just the foundation of self-acceptance and being a human with needs. And I want to build on kind of the next level, I guess, of that and get digging into letting your best self make an appearance and how you do that. So I want to acknowledge that this is a journey, and that's why I started so quote unquote basic last week, is because I think that you really, for me, it was really powerful and foundational to kind of figure those things out and work through that acceptance before getting into more of the like luxury, more of the romanticizing. I actually thought that romanticizing your life was like kind of dumb and frivolous for longer than I would like to admit. Okay. And it makes sense because when you are in survival mode, luxury seems frivolous. And so I wanted to start with, and that's why we did start with kind of the foundational, universal, we have needs, accept that we have needs, right? And then naturally, what are those needs? How can you meet those needs? That. And I want to kind of move on here and talk more about like why that is important and a little bit deeper and like more specific. Okay, so basically the premise I want to start with is that we are not our best selves when we're in survival mode. Okay, and a lot of us have been in survival mode for so long, whether it's trauma, neurodivergence, disability, um, trauma because of neurodivergence, which is a disability, like all those things, right? Um, and so we have normalized, a lot of us in the society have normalized being in survival mode because that's where we had to be. You know, nobody chooses to be in survival mode, right? Like you're put there by circumstances or whatever. And then it is a process and a healing journey to get out of survival mode and into living and thriving and being your best self seems so flippant. Um, but being able to move from surviving to like self-actualization. Okay. And so that's that kind of transition into self-actualization and deeper than just survival is what I want to get into today. Welcome. So obviously, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to like trauma therapize you through whatever you're going through today. Okay. Um, there is a huge important faction sector, whatever, for that. They serve an incredibly important role, and that's not what I'm doing here. So I want to be clear. I know that's like a therapist term, survival mode, right? Or survival, yeah. And I'm using it as like a general conversational, having a chat with a friend environment here. Okay. I feel like I should have figured out my definition a little bit more before I hit record. I didn't realize I was going to need to do that. Sorry. But here we are. Okay. So I'm using it like as a general term, not as not as a therapist because I'm not. Okay. But I think a lot of us are familiar enough with this type of terminology and like have an understanding of these situations where it's like we can self-identify where we're at and still learn from like generalized conversations about these things. Okay. So when we're talking about survival mode and you're just trying to get by. So again, like not the I don't even know the specific like therapist definition of it, but just the general place in life where you're just day to day just trying to get by, you're trudging, you're grinding, you're not really enjoying life, like you're not um man, that word I wanted came in and then disappeared. But you're just trudging through. You're not enjoying life. You're just like getting through it. Okay, that is the kind of survival mode I'm talking about. And part of why it's so important that I'm not talking about like clinically survival mode is because I think a lot of us are just, we get kind of into this survival space even if we have trauma and stuff that you should probably work through with the therapist, right? So many of us, additionally, or maybe even instead, right? We just kind of get sucked into this routine and this drudgery of life and this like blah, blah, blah. And you're like just going through the motions. And some of that we can address on our own as just like behavior modification, right? So awareness is a huge factor in that and wanting to move honestly from survival mode to where you're participating in life, where you're going from like a default where you're just checking the boxes and you're like a zombie and you're just doing the things that you're supposed to do and you're not really getting any fulfillment or like joy out of life and you're just like going through wait basically waiting for something to happen to you or something to change to somehow get better. And I want to take this opportunity to encourage us a lot of the times there's action that we can do to make it better. You don't always have to wait for something to happen to you. Sometimes you can be what happens to you, and we can make a better choice. And I want to be careful talking about this because I come from a place with a lot of privilege, right? And the choices that you make are limited by the options that you have to choose from. And so I do want to acknowledge that, right? You can only make a choice that's as good as the options you have available to you. And so I do want to acknowledge that. And I want to acknowledge that I'm also speaking often to people who also have a lot of privilege, and a lot of us have more options than we're acknowledging. Okay. So if that's you, then this might be for you. If it's not, and you just don't have the options, then this might not be a helpful conversation for you. And I don't want it to come across as like condemning or like blaming you for not having more options. Like that's not what I'm trying to do at all. I'm speaking to people who have the option to make better decisions for ourselves and encouraging us to do the things we can with what we have. I hope that's clear. If it's not, always hit me up, dude. Like, I don't have a doctorate. I'm just like speaking for personal experience. Okay. Like, this is a conversation. This is not, like I said, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. So if there's something that doesn't make sense or you want to correct me on, I would love to have this be like an actual conversation. And so always feel free to hit me up at the Fierce Framework. Okay. So, assuming that we're in this place where we have options, I want to encourage us to be aware that there is so often the option to choose something different. A lot of us are going through life by default, kind of on accident. Like we were set on this path by parents or school or whoever, and we thought that was like the only option. And now that I don't know if you're me, right? You're in your 30s and you're like, this isn't working for me. And you get far enough down the road where you kind of see where it's going. You're like, I don't want to go there, actually. When I realized like I probably didn't want to get married, which I did. And then I realized I didn't want to have kids. I was like, wait, where is like you're like looking down the path, right? You're like, where is this path going? Do I want to go there? And I was like, I don't think I want to go there. And I think a lot of us, like a lot of women my age that I've talked to, right, we've gone through kind of a similar awakening where it's like, what are we, where is this going? What are we doing? Like, I don't want to go here. Like, I don't want to take this journey. I need an exit ramp. And then, maybe you pull over to the side of the road or you take an exit ramp. You're like, okay, where do I want to go? What even are my options? And that can feel overwhelming and super scary. And especially if you pull over to the side of the road and you kind of stop and take a break and people like flying past you, like, what's wrong with you? Keep up. What are you doing? That can be a really hard place to be. But I want to encourage you that intentionality is so important because going further down the wrong road is not actually getting you further in relation to your goals, your dreams, where you want to be. So it can look good, right? You can get a lot of approval and encouragement from people around you as long as you're go, 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 go. Because do they really care where you end up? And some people do, right? Some people absolutely do. Okay. But that's part of why it's so important to be aware of who we're listening to and who we're letting speak into our lives because do they care where you end up? Or are they just encouraging you to go, 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 get off the side of the road and get back on the highway just because seeing people pulled over makes them uncomfortable, or they feel like it's, a security issue or it's going to cause a wreck or whatever, and they're trying to kind of protect the status quo. So realizing that we have an option and that you can move from the default to living more by design is a powerful, groundbreaking thing. And when we do that, then we can start down this path of intentionally figuring out where you want your life to go, like where you want to go in this life. And I think, at least for me, right, the first step was realizing that I didn't want to go where I was headed. And then you take a step back and you kind of analyze, okay, what are my options then and where do I want to go? And then you might have to experiment with a few things, and that is totally okay. Okay. But so we kind of have that like survival mode and by default, those are kind of like similar situations in this conversation. And then I want to talk about like when we're moving into our best selves or who we want to be or how we actually want to show up, then there's a lot more consideration and intentionality that goes into those decisions. Okay. So once you get off the hamster wheel, once you get off the freeway, right, then you're figuring out like, where am I driving this car now? I can't just follow the crowd. And so I believe when we're doing that, we actually need a lot more like creative energy, a lot more capacity so that we can strategize and make decisions with options that maybe we didn't even know we had, right? That we've never seen before. So it's not like an easy multiple choice test. It's more of like an essay where like you're creating the information, like you're creating the answer instead of just choosing between A or B, you're designing a solution for where you want to go. And I think that takes a lot of brain power, a lot of emotional energy, a lot of strategy. And so, in order to be in that place, that's part of why I think it's so important. Like, why I was talking about moving out of survival mode at the start, because it takes up so much more. And we often don't have that more. We don't have that capacity available to us when we're just trying to get through the day, when we're in that what I called survival mode. We're just trying to make it one day to the next. And so part of why I think romanticizing, and that's kind of the overarching topic these couple months, is it's pouring more into us to meet that deeper capacity that's required so that you can have what you need to analyze these new options or create new options for yourself to design the life that you want. And so, in order to, whether it's even just dream up a new life for yourself, or dream up a new next step, or a next chapter, or visualize what you want your next season to look like, um, or to create whatever it is that you want to work on, right? You need space to think, to create, to problem solve. And space is, it, I want to say, like, it's expensive, right? Because it's like, in this society, we're so like go, 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 busy, busy, busy. Every moment, every weekend, every is packed, right? And there's so many things that you're supposed to be doing, and boxes that you're supposed to be checking, and like there's never a chance to stop and take a breath and do anything. So when you choose to stop and you're taking time for yourself, you might hear that, oh, that's selfish. You might hear that, oh, that's lazy. You might hear, oh, that's, yeah, okay, selfish and lazy. Stick with the popular ones. And so, as with being different, like in any sense, right, there is that otherness where you kind of have to overcome that and like be okay with it, and then pour into yourself what other people might be draining with labels, judgment, whatever that is, right? And then like you're kind of compensating while you're finding other people more in alignment who are going to help pour into you. So it really takes living by design and kind of choosing where your path is going. It takes space and it takes creativity, and I think it takes strategy, right? And so we need more things to nurture us and to refill us when we're taking up that space, than if we're just following the crowd, checking the boxes, right? And I think part of why it can sound so selfish, but I do want to take a step back and consider, like, when you're in survival mode and you're just, or you're, right, you're go, maybe your words, maybe you're just trying to survive the day, right? Or maybe you're go, 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 and you're like, you just have no time for anything else. I want us to consider, are you your best self in those situations? Because I know I, for damn sure, was not. Okay. I was like an angry ball of stress for literal years. Okay. Because I had my schedule so packed that if one thing went wrong, it would throw off the whole rest of my day and maybe even week. And then I would be so frustrated, because then what am I going to do? And then I get so mad at whoever it was, even if it was me, who threw me off track. I didn't have time for little things like, I don't know, like a surprise party, right? Would have like thrown off my week, because a surprise, literally, I was booking like appointments to hang out with friends weeks in advance, which is, it's life. Like, that's fine, but like for me, it was, I'm not saying that that's always a bad thing, but for me, it was like a symptom of how packed my schedule was. And I had no room for like downtime, or like white space, or for anything to not go according to plan. And what I've learned the hard way is that life doesn't go according to the plan. And that's like kind of its thing. It's like a key factor of life, that stuff you didn't plan for and things that you didn't foresee are just going to happen. And so actually, I build more downtime into my life, and I'm taking it to kind of an extreme recently. But like, I started out with like, okay, I need to build in more downtime and just more space in between these things, because I'm basically planning for the unexpected, right? Something's going to come up. Not everything's going to go according to plan. Something's going to start late. Somebody else is going to show up late. And so if I can build a little bit of margin into my day, into my life, then the normal thing that life does, where not everything goes perfectly according to plan, that's not going to throw me off as bad, because I'm basically planning for that to happen by giving myself margin. And we can do this in literally, like, literal time, where you're building in margin between appointments, or, um, yeah, obligations. We can also do this in more of like a mental space and do it like psychologically, energetically, where you're not requiring every ounce of energy to be drained from you every day. And for me, that looked like my to-do list, right? So having a to-do list a mile long and like trying to get through as much as I could in a day and trying to force myself to be productive as much as I could and then berating myself whenever I wasn't productive because how else am I going to get through this to-do list? Taking a step back and taking a lot of stuff off that to-do list and creating more margin like in my energy has allowed me to show up a lot more the way I want to. And then also to show up for things, for relationships, for situations that are not planned, that I didn't see coming, right? Like I had a plan to record this podcast, and here we are, it's happening. But I had a friend call right before I was going to hit record, right before I was going to pull up Zoom to record, and I was able to take that phone call. And we had a great little phone call. It was like 10 minutes. And then I went back to recording the podcast. And I'm able to do that because I have margin. I don't have a whole lot else going on this evening that can't be pushed back. I don't have, like, I didn't only have that 30 minutes or whatever for this podcast and then only have the capacity to record this podcast and then I'm completely tapped out. I don't plan on being energetically annihilated at the end of each day. Instead, I plan on having some capacity left over for those things that do come up. So I want to like use that illustration to explain that like yes, it's with time when we're talking about margin, but also like energetically and psychologically like with your mental space. And it allows you the capacity. You literally are giving yourself more capacity. You're not you're maybe not making your capacity bigger, but when you're lowering what's in there, then you have more capacity for like expansion, right? Um, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. Say you have like a wading pool, and it's like 30 gallons. Well, if you fill it up to 30 gallons and you fill it up to the brim and anything happens, a kid gets in it to play, which is kind of the point, it's gonna start overflowing. It's over capacity at that point. But if you only fill it up to 20 gallons, you didn't increase its capacity. It's still a 30-gallon wading pool, but it has more capacity before it overflows. So now you have 10 gallons to play with, right? Kids can get in, the dog can get in. People can maybe splash around in the water and it stays in the pool because you have a little bit of leeway. And so that's what I mean by like having more capacity. You can't always I, I totally have a growth mindset. I think we can expand our capacity in a lot of ways, but I think it's a slow process. And so the like quick fix in the meantime, right, is to while we're working to expand our capacity, we can have the impact of expanded capacity by limiting what it is that's in there, taking some things off the plate, maybe delegating some things or just like letting some things go, even little things. Like I talk all the time about how this podcast is bi-weekly. Okay. That gives me capacity. I am practicing what I preach. Okay. Little things like that, right? It's like I can still have a podcast, but I also have that capacity because it's only every other week. And so I want you to take ideas like that and think, how can I apply this to my own life? Like maybe I do need to do something still. Maybe I can't just take it off my plate completely, but is there a way I can do maybe a lighter version of it or do it less often or do it with an accommodation or, do it on easy mode, something like that to where you're able to free yourself up because having time to be and just be is like the ultimate luxury. And I won't say that romanticize can't even say my own word, romanticization and luxury, like they're not the same thing. But I think the feeling can be, right? When you're like romanticizing your life, it does give you a feeling of luxury, even if it's just having the space to pay attention to how good the wind in your hair feels when you're driving down the freeway. You don't have to be at an all-inclusive resort and feel the fresh ocean wind in your hair, although highly recommend. But when you have capacity to pay attention and relish those moments, say it's just because I was talking on the last podcast about driving and just having some moments where I'm just driving and I just feel so happy with my life. And so that's why the image is in my head. And like you can just be driving down the road, but it's like if it's somewhere you want to go, maybe you're meeting a friend for coffee, or maybe you're going to happy hour, or maybe you're going to the gym, or maybe you're going to meet somebody for a job that you're doing for yourself, right? And so the whole, all of that intentionality creates a different experience of that moment. If you're driving down the road to go turn yourself in because you committed a crime and you're basically driving yourself to jail, that is a completely different feeling. Why was that the example that came in my head? That is a completely different feeling than if you're driving yourself to your favorite hammocking spot where you're going to go hammock and read a book. And so, because we have so much power, like control, influence, I think is probably a better word, influence on how we experience things. That's what I want to hone in on when we're talking about romanticization of like your life and your experience, because it can be the same thing. It can be the same reality, but the way we're able to like encounter and experience it can be hugely different based on where we're at, like mentally, emotionally. And that is part of why that margin, that space to be, to like design your life is so important because it literally sets the stage for you to change that experience. Also, I think like having space for peace, joy, gratitude, like it really helps us blossom and it helps us show up better for the people around us. When you have no capacity and you're late, and say you're like showing up to a coffee shop and you're already like, you have 2 seconds to get your order and they screw up your order. Now you have to get back in line and wait for them to fix their mistake. And now you're going to be late and this, that, and the other. And like, how nice are you going to be to that barista? How understanding are you going to be? How much grace are you going to have? Probably not a lot, and even if you do, it's probably going to be hard. And then you're probably going to have less grace for the next person who makes a mistake in your day, right? But if you have margin, if you have space, if you're not going to be late because you had an extra few minutes, then you just go back to the barista and say, hey, actually, this isn't what I ordered. Can I get XYZ? And then most often they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Thank you for being so nice about it. And then you guys might chit chat a little bit, right? Because otherwise it's like an awkward silence while they're fixing your drink. And then that's actually a really pleasant experience. And maybe you noticed her haircut and you told her she looked cute and you just made that lady's day or his. Little things like that. Like I get so like into this because of like literally giving ourselves the capacity helps us show up better. If you're not stressed to the max and your kid is bothering you about something and you literally have more capacity to like gentle parent and respond in a way that you want to show up for your kid and you are both going to be so much happier with that, and the relationship is going to be healthier than if you are stressed to the max and you have no capacity and you end up snapping at them because why are they bothering you when you're trying to do XYZ? It's a completely different experience. And so giving ourselves capacity, I know it can sound selfish, lazy, whatever, but it's actually so important and it helps us show up in this world as a better person, I believe, 100%. Okay. So yes, so all those reasons. I also want to encourage you that when you're having, like, when you're giving yourself space and you're like allowing yourself to breathe and pursue things that actually light you up and enjoy moments that bring you joy, you're able to uplift and encourage the people around you and also like be an example and show them how you got there, right? If you have time to make connections and to talk to people and show them how you got where you're going, right? You're not the only one who had to pull over on the side of the road and go, I don't want to go down this highway. I don't want to end up here. You're not the only one, but you may be further along than someone behind you. And when they come across your path, they might want to know, how did you figure this out? How did you find this other option I never heard about? How did you figure out how to choose between these options? Right. And so when we do the work of figuring out how to get from surviving and living by default to like designing our lives and being intentional, we're like doing the work and forging the path, and then we can share with the people around it. That's literally why I have this podcast. Okay. I'm like, I'm not perfect, and I'm definitely not like at the finish line, but I have done a lot of work to try to figure a lot of things out. And the little bit that I have figured out and the little bit that I do know, I want to share with you because I think it's so important. And it was so hard fought to get here. And if I can make it a little bit easier for somebody else, Lord knows I want to. Okay. I also want to encourage us too. Like, I know it can feel noble to struggle and to, try to do more with less and all this like corporate BS that we're fed, right? Like, necessity is the mother of invention and whatnot. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I think sometimes, and I said this in the last episode, like, don't struggle just to struggle. I think sometimes we struggle or we stay in hard situations or unhealthy situations because we feel like we have something to prove or that it's going to be like good for our character if we can like push through or like prove that we can do something without the proper resources or without the proper rest or without, that you can be super mom without the proper nutrition or support or like, but like, why? Okay. And sometimes you do need to push through, and sometimes it really is survival mode, like in a clinical sense. And okay, that's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about when you have a choice. So don't choose to struggle just to struggle because it feels noble or you want to feel like a martyr. Like, it's not, that's not it. Promise. Promise. I think the true nobility, right, is in finding a better way, testing it. Like, let's make sure it works because it's easy to throw around ideas that have no merit, but find a better way, test it, and then show it to others. So, what if you're able to get out of the struggle? What if you're able to learn something? What if you're able to find a better way and then show other people how their lives can also be better? Isn't that so much like more empowering than just staying in the struggle, just like prove that you're hardcore? Oh, mostly talking to myself there. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you got a lot out of it. If there's anything you want to discuss further, I always love hearing from you. I'm at the Fierce Framework on social media. My email is confidence@thefierceframework.net. Love hearing from you. You're doing so great, honestly. Keep it up. I will see you so soon. And until then, keep becoming fierce.